What is a credible market? Because depending on the particular region within which you operate in, depending on the cultural nuances, there might be a different interpretation here. Peter, let's start off with you by gauging your views, and we'll make our way down the panel.
You know, a credible market can be looked at in a number of ways and have different meanings. From the perspective of an investor, they're looking at the market conditions that they're investing in. From my experience, being the president of the Institute, we're looking at making our professionals credible, market credibility. So we look at standards, ethics, conduct, accountability, etc., plus of course marketing, to make professionals credible in the marketplace in which they act in. And also as an institute, we also obviously engage government to best practice and things like that. And we find that through that engagement, we gain credibility with the government. It's the issue of like trust. They will take our word for it, that this is the best approach on certain matters. So market credibility has different meanings depending on which kind of angle you're looking at it from. Are you a developer? Are you an investor? Are you a government official? But I think at the end of the day, it's trust. It boils down to that word and the issues that go into the trust aspect.
So I think the important thing that we must remember, for any market, there has to be something that can be sold, and a willing buyer that is going to purchase that. And often the state can get in the way of that, because any land that the state owns could potentially prevent the market from happening. So it's important for the state not to get in the way of the actual market, but facilitate the market to actually follow its processes. And then, as Peter says, the key thing with credibility is that there is some form of trust, that you can transact knowing that your transaction is valid and holds water and can go forward.
I also want us to address the elephant in the room. On the sidelines of the conversation today, a lot of topics have revolved around corruption and that relationship between the private sector together with government officials who today are some of the most wealthiest tycoons when it comes to the property sector, and who controls who monitors who has the ability to actually reach out and correct the systems and the ills within the concerns that lead to a lack of transparency, again, lack of accountability. Nnema, perhaps let's get your views on naturally the investment impact that this has, and Sean, how the RICS plays a role in this place, and if the RICS and its members in the African context can actually help correct things if they are wrong in the government perspective.
A credible public market would be a market in which, if there is bad information about a company, the markets respond, etc. If there is bad information about an economy, the foreign exchange rates would react to that. And so that defines, in my opinion, a credible market. On the business sector, and particularly in places like Nigeria, you have a cleaning out of corruption on the private sector. And the government sector still remains corrupt, and in that situation it's really up to the citizens to use their voting power and their voice in the halls of government, or to lobby the government to get things to change. So I do believe that the citizens have a role in fighting corruption, and we would all want to think or hope to think that the government would make the efforts to reduce corruption, but I think at the end of the day, it's private sector that would push that.
I think it's probably important just to recognise that the built environment isn't the end here, it's the means to an end. Ultimately, we're talking about how do societies function and how do people live, work, play, prosper and drive economies. And I think sometimes we think that the built environment is the end. Well, it's the people who are going to use that, and I think that's a really important thing. I think it comes back to your point, but actually people have a role here very much in terms of how they vote. I think that the important component here is that wherever you look around the world, that there isn't a completely perfect system. Regulators have been unsuccessful in other markets of the world. Governments have been unsuccessful in dealing with corruption and ethical challenges. And I think that what you really need to do is to try and create an environment where there are sufficient enough people prepared to hold each other to account. Because I think that's what really it comes down to, the willingness to stand up and hold to account. And I think that where maybe there is closer models to that are where governments, regulators and professional bodies actually come together in some way to try and hold each other to account. And I think professional bodies, and there are some significant organisations across Africa here, I think that maybe one of the things that the RSS can do is to help bring a voice to the professions and bring that voice to governments. Because I think that professional bodies and with what they see in other markets of the world, I think can suggest ways in which markets can change to increase credibility. But I do think that you can't just rely on governments. That's a really important message I think everywhere in the world would recognise, that you need to create that mechanism where there are sufficient enough people prepared to share voice and hold each other to account.